Just 19, up to Surah Yasin, just 23. So again, just over 4 juz. Surah Al-Shu'ara to Surah Yasin, just over 4 juz. And then day 6, you read Surah Al-Saffat, which is straight after Yasin, just 23, to Surah Al-Hujurat, which is in just 26. So that's slightly less than 4 juz that you're reading there. So that's 13 surahs, Surah Al-Saffat to Surah Al-Hujurat. Day 5 and 6. The meanings of the Gospels that were sent and revealed to Isa alayhi salam, forget the New Testament. Read Surah Al-Shu'ara to Al-Hujurat. Surah Al-Shu'ara to Surah Al-Hujurat, the key messages that were revealed to Isa alayhi salam are to be found within those surahs. And then the khatam that the Sahaba did on day 7, Surah Qaf to Surah to the end of the Quran. That's the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, وَفُضِّلْتُ بِالْمُفَصَّلِ وَفُضِّلْتُ بِالْمُفَصَّلِ, and I was given preference to the Mufassal, meaning the last part of the Quran, Surah Qaf, in just 26, towards the end of 26, to the end of the Quran. And then the Mufassal, and that's something, somebody wants to get serious with the Quran, Mawsim al-Quran, within Mawsim al-Quran, in the season of Quran, then that's where you go to. Go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, take his hadi, take his minhaj, take his way that he gave to his companions, because even when Sahaba asked to take more, like one Sahabi, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him to read in 7 days, he said, I can do more. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, don't do more. He said, don't do more. This is the maximum. Because he wanted to do a daily reading of the Quran. The Prophet ﷺ told him no. So the Prophet ﷺ said, read it every month. He said, I can do more. He said, every 15 days. I can do more. The Prophet ﷺ said, every 10 days. He said, I can do more. He said, every 7 days, وَلَا تَزِدْ, and don't do more. And don't do more. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ gave as a standard for his companions to read. In terms of tafsir al-Quran, inshallah daily, because we have 10 sessions, what we'll do, before looking at the ahadith and the verses that we're going to study from Surah An-Nisa, what we thought we'd share, Imam Al-Ghazali in his Ihya, in his section on Kitab Adab Tilawat al-Quran, he has a section on the book of etiquette of reading the Quran. He has a section particularly about tafsir al-Quran, or more particularly what he terms Adab Baṭiniyyah lil-Quran, the internal etiquettes to have with the Quran, how to approach the Quran internally. The outward etiquettes are things that were standard, like you must be in a state of wudu. Adab in terms of even if you're reading from memory, try and be in a state of wudu. Try and be in a clean state with clothes, facing the qibla, use a miswak. These are all adab zahir. These are all outer etiquette. Should be there as a standard. But the tanazzulat ma'an al-Quran, for a person to receive the real meanings of the Quran that go beyond, that continue after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because revelation of the Quran stopped with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but tanazzulat ma'an al-Quran never ceases, never comes to an end. The meanings of the Quran coming to the heart of the believers, that never stops until Yawm al-Qiyamah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described the Quran as bahrun la tanqadi ajaibuh. He said it's an ocean whose wonders never stop. So it's open to all, but there has to be inner etiquettes that must be present. There must be an inner state when you come to the Quran. So Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah, when he discusses this, what he terms a'mal al-batin, the inner states to be with the Quran. He lists out 10 states that a person must hold, and every day we'll read one. We'll try and summarize one of each one of these. So number one, the 10 inner etiquettes to have with the Quran. A'mal al-batin. Number one, Imam al-Ghazali says, فهم أصل الكلام. فهم عظمة الكلام. فهم عظمة الكلام. Understanding the greatness of the words. Understanding the greatness of the words. And this is to understand that even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed it to us, we should understand Al-Quran Azim. جاء من العظيم ونزل على قلب العظيم. Everything about the تنزل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought His words and His meanings, which are eternal meanings, that exist in the divine essence. That's something you study in Aqidah. صفة قائمة بذات الله تعالى. كلام الله صفة أزلية قائمة بذات الله تعالى. That the words of God, the revelation, these are meanings that exist within the divine essence. And no human being has the capacity to understand the true nature of the divine. Yet He's revealed it to us. Yet He's revealed some aspects of eternal meanings to the divine. And that's a lutf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a gentleness and the mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done towards human beings. And in addition, the azama of kalamillahi ta'ala. And we read it, and we just go through it. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. We read it as though it's nothing. But the first point of contact between the divine and humanity, it was something tremendous. Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions that when the Prophet received the Quran, it has to be Al-Azim who received it. Nobody else could receive it. It had to be the Great One who received it. She said, day, beads of sweat were pouring down his head. On a cold day, beads of sweat were pouring down his head. One other occasion, a Sahabi says the Prophet riding on a camel, and Jibreel comes and starts reading the Quran, revealing Quran to him. Says the camel's stomach is pinned onto the ground. The camel could not bear the weight of the Quran that was coming down to the Prophet. Abdullah ibn Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu says on one occasion, I was writing down words that were being revealed to the Prophet, and his lap or his thigh was on my thigh. And he said Jibreel came down with 3 words, and 3 words is the shortest ever came to the Prophet in one instance. The longest is Surah Al-An'am, over 160 verses. The shortest revelation that ever came to the Prophet in one instance, غَيْرِ أُولِي الضَّرَرِ. 3 words from Surah An-Nisa. غَيْرِ أُولِي الضَّرَرِ. لَا يَسْتَوِي الْقَاعِدُونَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ غَيْرِ أُولِي الضَّرَرِ. 3 words came down to the Prophet. The weight of it was so much that Sayyidina Zayd ibn Thabit said, my leg almost snapped because of the weight of the Quran being revealed to the Prophet. 3 words came down, were too heavy for Zayd ibn Thabit, a noble companion, Sahib al-Quran, one of the greats of the Quran. He couldn't carry the weight of 3 words, yet the Prophet was able to carry it. Yet the Prophet was able to carry that, came to the heart of the Prophet. So it tells you something about it, that the weightiness of these words that came down to the Prophet was able to carry that. Except for the Prophet was able to carry that. Because no human is able to comprehend the weightiness of the divine. The greatness of the divine, His dhat, His sifat, His being and His attributes. No human being has the ability to comprehend that and to carry that. As an example, like one of the Salihin, Imam al-Ghazali mentions this. One of the Salihin gave an example to try and make us understand how Allah revealed the Quran. He says you have an animal, birds, animals, any type, you've got a pet cat, any type of animal. As human beings, we have ways of communicating. We communicate through sounds. We communicate through sounds. Like you may whistle, you may clap, but there's ways that we communicate with animals, and the animals understand what we say from that. Imam al-Ghazali says, that's the Quran is revealed to us. That's the Quran is revealed to us. That's the distinction between the Quran and Kalamullah al-Azali. The Quran that's revealed to us and eternal meanings that exist within the divine essence is the difference between human speech and humans communicating to animals. They're just sounds that we have. The animal understands the meanings from that sounds that we have. and from the clapping or from the movements, that the animal understands that we're the animal. We are the animal. Allah subhanahu reveals something. He's brought it down to a level that we're able to comprehend. Just as we bring our speech down to a level that animals can comprehend. Allah subhanahu has brought those meanings. His speech doesn't have sound. It doesn't have letters. None of that. The words of Allah subhanahu, the eternal speech of God doesn't have any of that. But what's He done? He selected words revealed, or language that He created for humanity. And He selected the best of language, Arabic language. And then He chose that to carry meanings, but bringing it down to a level that human beings can understand. But what we should never understand from that's the extent of the word of the divine. That's not the extent of that's because of who we are. That's because of who we are that Allah says to us, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In terms of His eternal meanings and divine essence, one letter of the Quran, as some of the awliya, they said one letter of the Quran has more meaning and greater weight than Jabal Qaf, than the greatest mountain in existence. One letter in the Quran has greater meanings and greater weight than Jabal Qaf, than the greatest mountain in existence. And that meaning is indicated to us in the Quran. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. Now, no mountain in our world of existence can bear the weight of Kalamullah. If we were to reveal this Quran to a mountain, it would collapse. It would disintegrate out of fear of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet, and this is something about Bashar, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us, that we're able to tolerate that we're able to take that. So don't ever think that Quran is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. It's our words, it's our language that He created for us, but He used that to convey a message to us. He used it to convey a message, just as we communicate to animals, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala communicates to the human animals by bringing the language down to the level that they're at. So what that should tell us, Imam Al-Ghazali is telling us, like you want to open your heart to the Quran, understand the greatness of the Quran, understand the weightiness of the Quran, that it came from Al-Azim. It is Azim. It came from Al-Azim and it was revealed to Al-Azim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The words are great. They came from the Great One and they were revealed to the Great One sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The only heart that could bear the weight of the Quran. The only heart that could bear the weight of the Quran, because it was a purified heart. It was a purified heart that was not able to do wrong. What stops us from taking the weight of the Quran is our dhunub and our ma'asi. It's the sins within our heart. It's not even the sins of our limbs, because the sins of our limbs reflect the sins of our hearts. Like what stops us from receiving the Quran with all of its weight is the fact that we have anger in our hearts. It's the fact that we have envy in our hearts. It's the kibr, it's the hasad, it's the ujub, it's the riyah. All of those sicknesses in our hearts, all of those diseases in our hearts, right? The purity of the Quran, it will not settle in the heart. Right? For the Quran to remain, the purity of the Quran to remain, it needs a purified heart. It needs a purified heart. It needs us to empty our hearts of the filth and the dirt within our hearts. And if you want to take Shahr al-Quran, Shahr al-Sawm, Shahr al-Siyam, and Siyam and Quran, Yashfa'an, they come together on Yawm al-Qiyamah. They come together. They stand in front of Allah subhanahu together. The fast and the Quran, they will intercede on behalf of a person. Quran and Siyam, they interlink, they come together. So in the month of Quran, elsewhere when Imam Al-Ghazali speaks about the three types of fast, Sawm al-Umum, al-Khusus, wa-Khusus al-Khusus, the elite of the elite, the highest fast. He calls it Sawm al-Aghyar. Sawm al-Aghyar. It's a fast where you rid your heart of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You fast where you empty your heart. And for a heart to take the Quran, to be min ahli al-Quran, to be from the people of the Quran, for your heart to take that, you must empty your heart of al-aghyar, of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, particularly the diseased others, the disease, the hubb al-mal, hubb al-dunya, love of this world, love of wealth, love of praise of people. All of those sicknesses and disease in the heart, they have to be emptied, and the heart has to be cleansed and purified for the Quran to. One of the strange points though to note, in order to rid your heart of that, it's the Quran that's going to do that. The Quran is a cleanser of the heart. Dhikrullah and Quran. The Quran is what cleans the heart. The more you read the Quran, the cleaner your heart becomes. But for the Quran to settle in your heart, you must clean your heart. But what's the polisher of the heart? What is it that will clean the heart? It's the Quran itself. So there's an opposite here. And the Quran will not settle into your heart until you clean it, but it's the Quran that will clean it. It's the Quran itself that will clean it. Once you've cleansed your heart of those diseases, then the Quran will stay at ease within your heart. It's no longer a stranger. It's no longer a stranger in your heart. It settles in your heart where it was meant to be. The Quran is meant to be in the heart of the believer, such that it permeates the being of the believer, so that he becomes min Ahlul Quran, from the people of Quran. And a point about Ahlul Quran, the true awliya are Ahlul Quran. When you look at anybody who's described as being from the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will see that they, number one, your relationship with the Quran, number one, they read the Quran. Number two, they reflect over the Quran. Number three, they embody the Quran. That's your relationship with the Quran. They read the Quran, they reflect over the Quran, they embody the Quran. Anybody that you will never hear of as being referred to as that's a wali, that's a arif billah and so on, they will always have this relationship with the Quran. They are never people who have a disconnect from the Quran. The greatest of them, Ash-Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, in Ramadan, and when we tell him, when we're advising people now do a weekly khatam of Quran, they would do 2 daily khatams of the Quran. That's Ahlullah. That's Ahlullah. That's Ahlul Quran. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, daily, out of Ramadan, he'll be doing two khatams of the Quran. Imam Al-Bukhari, daily, out of Ramadan, he's doing 1 khatam of the Quran. And they're Ahlul Quran, they're Ahlullah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ahlul Quran, Ahlullahi wa khassatu. The people of the Quran, not Huffaz al-Quran, not Huffaz al-Quran. Like our shuyukh, they say, you're not Hafiz al-Quran, you're Mahfuz bil-Quran. You're not Hafiz al-Quran, you're Mahfuz bil-Quran. You don't memorize. Hifz in reality is not memorizing, it's protecting and guarding. The Quran protects you. The Quran protects you. When there's no Quran within you, kal bayt al-kharib. The Prophet said like a deserted house. Right? When your heart is devoid of the Quran, you have no protection. You don't do hifz of the Quran does hifz of you. You do not do hifz of the Quran. Memorization is the first stage. It's the wiqaya that comes from the Quran, the protection that comes from the Quran. And in the times, because we always talk now, as we should do, about alamat akhir al-zaman, signs of the last day. What's the protection from the Dajjal? It's Quran, Surah Al-Kahf. What did the Prophet ﷺ tell Sayyidina Ali in these times? When Sayyidina Ali, when he heard about all of these signs, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, what's the salvation in those times? Kitabullah. Prophet ﷺ said Kitabullah, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you're mahfuz bil Quran, you're not hafiz al Quran. Zahiran you're hafiz, the reality is you're mahfuz bil Quran. So the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were protected by the Quran because they became people of the Quran, and they are what the Prophet ﷺ said, Ahlullahi wa khassatu. They are the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His special ones. But to be that type of person, it's not somebody who goes around with the badge or the label that he's hafiz al Quran. Because Al-Quran, as the Prophet ﷺ said, Hujjatun laka aw alayk. It stands for you or against you. There are many people of the Quran, and Huffaz of Quran, the Quran will speak against that person. Now, if somebody reads it regularly, who reflects, who embodies, that's Ahlul Quran. Somebody reads, reflects, and embodies the Quran, that's somebody who's considered to be Ahlul Quran. Wallahu ta'ala alam. We'll begin, as we said at the beginning, for those, tomorrow the handouts will be provided tomorrow. So we're going to study Surah An-Nisa. And we're going to do slightly differently. Because previously we focused on the hadith, but what I wanted to do this time is focus upon the ayat. So this time we'll actually do a study of the ayat, at the same time giving an overview of the verses. Because when you study the Quran, one of the things that when you notice when studying the Quran, you cannot take verses out, you cannot study verses in isolation. You can't just pluck out a verse and look at it. One of the keys to understanding a verse is putting into its context within the Quran. And Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, he mentions that the greatest secrets of the Quran comes in looking at the connections between what comes before and what comes after. The greatest secrets in understanding any part of the Quran is looking at its context within. Where is it? Which surah is it? Which part of it? Like if it's in the 7 long verses, that's telling you something about the nature of it. If it's in the 100-verse surah, if it's in the repeated, it's telling you something about the nature of it. And then look at the surah. Look at the surah itself will tell you something about the verse. Then look at the beginning and the end of the surah, and look at the verse that comes before and the verse after, and look at the surah that comes before and the surah after it. You're building a complete picture of the Quran. Like the view of the majority of the people of the Quran, the ulama, they said that the Quran is one complete narrative. It's not 114 surahs. It's one whole book. It's one whole book, which is broken up into parts. So you can't just pluck it out. You can't just take it out. It's read as one whole. It's read as one whole, so it has to be seen in its context. So what we're going to do this time, we look at the verse itself, look at it in the context around it. And then, because Imam Al-Bukhari only selects some verses, I think it's about 30 odd verses he selects from Surah An-Nisa. So even the in-between, because Surah An-Nisa is I think it's about 160 odd verses. So he's selecting key verses. So we'll look at the passages in between, summarize and overview the passages in between. So we'll focus on a study of the verses, and then along with that we look at the hadith. But the verses will be primary, and then we'll take the hadith as supplementary to give us an understanding of the surah. Just quickly to introduce the surah. In the previous years we looked at Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran. Al-Zahrawan, the Prophet called them the two radiant surahs, the two illuminated surahs, Al-Baqarah, Al-Imran. Al-Baqarah, in summary, the whole of Surah Al-Baqarah is about you as a believer. It's your personal worship. It's about perfecting you as a believer. If you perfected Al-Baqarah within yourself, you are the perfect believer, outwardly, zahiran. Batinan is Al-Imran. The perfect believer inwardly is somebody who personifies Al-Imran. And so if you have Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran together, you have a Zahrawan. You have the two shining, radiant, illuminating surahs within you. So Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran, if you live them, you are Al-Insan Al-Kamil, you are Al-Mu'min Al-Kamil. You are a complete believer through Baqarah and Al-Imran. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ told us, Yawm Al-Qiyamah, Baqarah and Al-Imran will lead the believer. Baqarah and Al-Imran, they will lead the believer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surah An-Nisa is a surah that deals with societal rules. Al-Ijtima'iyya, Surah Ijtima'iyya. It deals with rules to do with society. And particularly in the context of Arabia then, and it's the same now, the downtrodden of society. Who were the most oppressed? The one that the Prophet ensured, and Allah ensured that their rights would be protected. Two people, An-Nisa wal-Aitam, women and orphans. In all societies, those who are oppressed and wronged the most, women and orphans. Surah An-Nisa is there about ensuring that the rights of women and the rights of orphans are taken care of. In addition, so you'll see that throughout Surah An-Nisa, dealing primarily with the rights of women and the rights of orphans, at the same time building up rules around how marital relations should be, setting background, setting certain rules around how a husband and wife should be together. There's an extensive discussion at the beginning of Surah An-Nisa about that. But amazingly, the very center of Surah An-Nisa, almost not the very center, close to the center of Surah An-Nisa, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولُ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. The verse about going to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when you are in a state of sin, you go to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the very next verse after that, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ. Allah swears an oath by the Lord of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they are not believers until they Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the hakam between them, until they make Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the judge, as the arbitrator between them. So the central role of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of building up relations comes at the center of Surah An-Nisa. The relationships between believers as a society, starting with the family onwards as a society, it all revolves around Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It all revolves around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hence, he's there in the midst of it. In the midst of it, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is there. And then the surah moves on to speak about certain international rules to do with war. Rules to do with war, dealing with the enemy, dealing with the unbelievers. I'm part of that. And it's an interesting, inshallah, we'll come on to that. You have Salat al-Qasr al-Salat, Salat al-Khawf. Two prayers side by side. Traveller's prayer and the prayer in times of war, side by side, put together by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayers in which there's a change in how you normally pray. So after Allah subhanahu speaks about certain ahkam al-jihad, about certain rules around war, then Allah subhanahu gives some alteration that takes place in prayer. And then towards the end of Surah An-Nisa, as you move into the Juz 5, Allah subhanahu then introduces a discussion on munafiqeen, about hypocrites. And one of the more frightening verses in the Quran comes that إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ, that the hypocrites are in the lowest level of hellfire. That comes at the end of Juz 5, coming towards the end of Surah An-Nisa. So there's a discussion about munafiqeen, and Allah even gives us some signs of who are alamat al-munafiqeen, which are worrying for us, because there's two repeated signs that Allah gives about munafiqeen, which unfortunately we see too much within us. When Allah describes the munafiqeen, الَّذِينَ إِذَا قَامُوا إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ قَامُوا كُسَالًا, when they stand to pray, they stand lazily. They drag themselves up to prayer. They drag themselves up to prayer. قَامُوا كُسَالًا لَا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا, and they hardly do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just 33 subhanallah, 33 alhamdulillah, 33 Allahu Akbar. And that's their dhikr. And they think they've done a lot by that. That's alamat al-nifaq. That's a sign of munafiqeen that comes there in Surah An-Nisa. The ending of the surah then moves on to speak about certain deviancies within the faith, the beliefs of al-Yahud wal-Nasara. Al-Yahud wal-Nasara. And by that you have a connection back to Surah Al-Baqarah and Ali Imran. Surah Al-Baqarah was all about, or the first half of Al-Baqarah is about the belief of the Jews. Surah Ali Imran, the first half is about the belief of Christians. First half of Al-Baqarah is the belief of the Jews. First half of Ali Imran is about the belief of the Christians. At the end, as you come to around verse 150 odd, you move in Surah An-Nisa, Allah then starts speaking about some of the errors that crept into the Jews, how they deviated. And then tying it into Christianity, then you have the verse about the ascension of Isa alayhi salam, where they claim that they killed al-Masih alayhi salam. بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. So Allah then moves on to Christianity. And He calls both of them, Jews and Christians, لَا تَغْلُوا فِي دِينِكُمْ. Don't go to extremes in your religion. Don't move away from the true message that all of these prophets came with. And the Surah An-Nisa ends with Ayat al-Mirath, an ayah the Prophet himself called Ayat al-Sayf, al-Sayf bis-Sad. The summer verse tells it when it was revealed. So you have three verses in Surah An-Nisa that deal with inheritance. Verse 11, verse 12, and the last ayah. And when you study it, we studied it here in Madrasa every year, in year 3 we study it. You see that there's a focus on the inheritance share of women, because that's what this surah is about. Right, the share of the men is taken care of. You have what's known as al-asaba, the universal heirs, the males who inherit. But the Quran is focusing upon the females to ensure that their share is taken, that they have their share. And so the surah begins, verse 11 and 12, with inheritance, and it ends with inheritance. And as we mentioned, as we were taught, the verses of inheritance are one of the greatest miracles of the Quran. The great verses of inheritance, even though it's pure legal, but that's the miracle of it. Right? When somebody comes and says, I'm only going to follow the Quran and I'll pray according to the Quran, I say, mustahil, you can't pray. If you're just going to follow the Quran, you cannot pray. You will not know any of the rules of fasting. You don't know anything about zakat, hajj, any of the rules of religion. You need the Prophet to come and clarify. The Prophet came to clarify what was revealed to them. But in case, just in case, and you see this occasion, Allah does this, just in case people may mistakenly assume certain things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In case somebody thinks that Allah cannot reveal a whole legal system in the Quran, He's done it with mirath. Now, is the Prophet needed? Not with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For us, yes. With Allah, He doesn't need any human being. If he wants to give you the whole of prayer in one verse, He could have done so. If He wants to give you the whole of zakat in one ayah, He could have done so. Any aspect of religion, He could have done it in one verse. He did it with mirath. He did it with inheritance, 3 verses, everything, which is why you don't have madhahib in inheritance. You don't have different madhabs in inheritance. It's one madhab that you follow, because the Quran spells it all out for you, which also tells you there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had the madhahib. There's a reason why you have differences. If He wanted to, He could have spelt out every single detail of every rule in 1 or 2 verses like He did with inheritance. So it's one of the great miracles in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shown, don't for 1 minute think, I need anybody to come and clarify what this Quran is about. If I want, I can show you the whole thing in 1 or 2 verses, and He did it. Similar to, and we're not going to study this will come, إِذَا أَحْيَانَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, this will come in the future. Surah Yusuf. Imam Al-Qurtubi, he comments about Surah Yusuf. He says, one of the things you notice about stories of the Quran, they come in segments that are scattered around the Quran for reasons. Because the Quran is not a storybook. But then Imam Al-Qurtubi says, it's as though Allah is trying to challenge humanity to say, if you think I can't tell you a story, here's the best of all stories. نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. If you want a story, here's the best of all stories. The longest story in the Quran, 111 verses. So just in case people start assuming Allah is not a storyteller, He's not. But He said, I can tell you the best of all stories. Just in case somebody thinks Allah can't set down a legal system in the Quran, He said, here it is. Ayat al-Mirath, the whole system in one. So that's an overview of Surah An-Nisa. Inshallah, and tomorrow, إِذَا أَحْيَانَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, we'll begin Surah An-Nisa tomorrow properly. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Are there any questions on what we spoke about? MashaAllah, you managed to stay awake today, MashaAllah. We'll let you fall asleep over the next few. Muhammad.
It's something that you touched upon with the revelation of the Quran for Rasul. You said it was the first interaction between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the human beings.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, how do you understand that previous revelation when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interacted with Sayyidina Musa?
Sorry, just to clarify what was meant by that. The first point of contact in the revelation of the Quran to humanity was the Prophet ﷺ. It's not the first revelation that ever came down. Just to say that he's the only one who could have borne the weight of the Quran. No. So it's the first point of contact in the revelation of the Quran to humanity was the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, just to add a point on that, something that came to mind about the weight of the Quran. Imam Al-Ghazali, he further adds in there, he says, because the Quran was placed first in Lawh Mahfuz. He said no angels have the ability to take verses out of the Quran because of the weight of the Quran. He said only Israfil alayhi salam with Jibreel alayhi salam, because Israfil alayhi salam is the angel who's designated to take care of Lawh Mahfuz. He said only he has the ability, and Jibreel alayhi salam. No angel can carry the weight of any letter of the Quran. So only the Prophet ﷺ could do that from humanity, take it directly. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah?
Could you just repeat the surah that you mentioned Rasulullah used to pray before going to sleep?
After Isha. Surah Al-Mulk, Surah Alif Lam Mim Sajda, Surah Bani Israel, Surah Al-Zumar, and then the 6 surahs that are collectively called Al-Musabbiḥāt, and they are Surah after Al-Waqi'ah, not Surah Al-Hashr. Comes after Al-Waqi'ah, Sabbaha lillahi nafs. Surah Al-Hadid, then Surah Al-Hashr, and then you have Surah Al-Saf, Surah Al-Jumu'ah, At-Taghabun, and then Sabbih Isma Rabbika al-A'la. They're the 6 surahs known as Musabbiḥāt. Just a point about those Musabbiḥāt, the 6 Sabbaha surahs. The Prophet ﷺ said about them, so there's one ayah in these 6 surahs that is, I think he's either said equivalent or greater than 1,000 verses in the Quran. And the Quran has over 6,000 verses, roughly 1/6 in terms of reward. There's one ayah in these 6, the Prophet ﷺ said is greater than 1,000 verses in the Quran. Some of them said that one verse is هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن. Others, they said it's لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل. So there's a disagreement over what's that one verse. The Prophet ﷺ didn't tell us definitively what that one verse was. Wallahu a'lam. Any other questions?
When you said that reading the Quran, it cleanses the heart, is it better to read it yourself, or can you listen to a recording and will it have the same impact?
It's better to read it yourself. Reading to a recording or reading to people reading the Quran is a sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ established, and that will come in Surah An-Nisa. The Prophet ﷺ asked certain companions to read the Quran to him because he enjoyed to listen to the Quran, and because it increases your attachment and your yearning for the Quran, and because of that, and because it cleans the heart. The only reason why I'm saying it's not to is because some people get lazy with that and then start listening and don't read themselves. There's a greater reward in reading it yourself. Listening has its reward, but there's a greater reward in reading it yourself. So it should be a bit of both. Wallahu a'lam. And if you want to listen to Abdul Basit, and he said there's something special, ruhani, there's something spiritual within his reading that has an effect on the hearts of people who listen. Wallahu a'lam. Any other question? How's your fast going, brother? No other question. Alhamdulillah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, nastaghfirullah, nasaluka al-jannata wa na'udhu bika minan nar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, nastaghfirullah, nasaluka al-jannata wa na'udhu bika minan nar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, nastaghfirullah, نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. وإلى حضرة النبي الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.